Hello everyone and welcome back to a Year in the TikTok. Today we are covering ProfBrainFever, who is also Chris Morse. He is in fact a fat acceptance advocate. We even see that in his bio. But it is worth noting that while he is very much in the fat acceptance realm, he has many TikToks on it, his primary focus is nerd culture stuff. So we're going to be skipping a lot of his TikToks because commenting on nerd culture isn't really something I do on this channel, and it just kind of seems irrelevant. But we're still going to go through his TikToks because he is definitely in the fat acceptance realm. So without further ado, I guess we'll just jump right into it.
So the thing about fat representation in media is that you can't just look at a piece of media and say, oh, there's a fat character, this must be positive representation. You actually have to ask some questions first. Number one, who is writing this piece of media? Are they a fat person? Maybe, maybe not. Number two, why is this character in this piece of media fat? Does their fatness serve a purpose for the narrative? Because a lot of the time, I dare say most of the time, it does. Particularly when the character is played by a thin actor in a fat suit. Because otherwise, why would they put the thin actor in a fat suit unless the fatness meant something? And then you ask, is the fatness meant to be seen as neutral, positive, or negative? Guess which one shows up the most in modern media? So the thing about fat...
So I actually don't have a whole lot to say on this one. I don't really think that we need a huge amount of fat representation in media in general, but that's me. I'm kind of neutral on the whole fat representation thing. I don't think it's hugely necessary. I think some of the pushing of the fat acceptance crowd on wanting more characters to be fat is a little unreasonable, but I don't necessarily have a problem with it either. In terms of who's writing the character, are they a fat person or not, I think, and whether that plays into positive fat representation or not, the thing is that writing a character based on that's similar to you does give greater authenticity to the way the character is written most of the time. I don't think that it's wrong, though, for someone who is not part of the group that character represents, in order for it to be positive. I don't think you have to be in that group in order for the character to be a positive representation. Now, is it as holistic or is it as authentic as someone writing from that group? Probably not, no. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not positive, you know? But I don't really have a whole lot to say on this one, and we're just gonna kind of move on. There's just not much for me to say on it.
Hi there, IH_7473. I'd just like to give you, and anyone who can see this, a bit of advice. As you're scrolling through TikTok, if you come across a video that you disagree with, that's fine, but you shouldn't do this. And I'm specifically referring to, so who cares? Because it's either an indication of incredible ignorance, or it's disingenuous. Those are the only options. Who cares? I care. I'm the person who made the video. Clearly I care. Who else cares? The over 300,000 people who viewed that video and the thousands and thousands who have liked that video. That's who cares. Now, if you don't care, you personally don't care, that's fine. You can simply scroll away.
So the comment he's responding to says, people become actors to play a range of different people, not the same person. So who cares? If they can act, they can act. And I'm actually not going to comment too much on, like, clearly he cares. I'm thinking this is in reference to the fat representation one, or it might be an earlier video, but this is labeled Fat Talk, so I do want to just comment on it real quick. And he does care, clearly. There's other people that do definitely care. I think the so who cares bit here is a matter of it doesn't matter, which clearly it matters to you, and that's fine. in terms of disagreeing with someone, I don't think that this one was particularly rude. It's offering a difference of opinion, and that idea of just scrolling on is, I understand, I'm of two minds on it. So in terms of, I'm mostly talking about the idea of scrolling on when you have a differing opinion. Yes, you can absolutely just scroll on if you have a differing opinion, but I don't think this one was particularly rude or hateful. I think it was offering a different perspective, maybe a little bit more bluntly and a little bit more curtly than would be ideal. But I don't think that it's wrong to have a different opinion, a difference of opinion, and express it on someone who's expressing an opinion online. This comes down to, I just don't like the idea of, if you have a difference of opinion, just keep it to yourself and move on, even when I'm putting forth my own opinion. It just, I don't know, it just seems so anti-discussion, I just, like, it's almost like a promotion of an echo chamber, and it just bugs me, I guess. Like, there are plenty of people that disagree with me on certain points that I make on these videos, and I don't, like, I expect that because I'm putting forth a series of opinions and ideological differences to the fat acceptance movement that's not necessarily going to match up with everyone. So I would expect people to disagree with me. And I think that's fine, and I think it's fine if people voice their opinions. This person isn't saying, you know, shut up fatty or anything derogatory or rude from what I can tell. It doesn't seem particularly rude. Clearly he got caught up on the "so who cares" bit, but I don't think that was meant to be necessarily flippant as much as it was. Whether the person is fat or not is irrelevant. It was just worded, you know, in a non-ideal way. I don't know. I'm curious about your guys' opinion on whether, if you see something on social media that you disagree with, should you just scroll on, or do you think it's fine for someone to pose a different viewpoint than the one being expressed? And what would be the parameters for expressing that difference of opinion for you? For me, I think if someone's doing it in a polite, or at the very least cordial, like, manner where it's not incendiary, it's not meant to be flippant or cruel or anything, it's a difference of opinion being expressed, I think that's fine, and I think that's part and parcel with being on the internet and expressing your opinions. But I'm curious as to what you guys think.
It's called acting. You're acting to be someone else. What if a skinny guy plays a big guy and gives a better performance than if a big guy did it? This has never happened. Ever. Every performance of a thin person in a fat suit ever would have been better performed by an actual fat person. Period. It's called acting. You're acting to...
Ooh, I don't know if I agree with that. It kind of did, like, you're saying it would be better performed by a fat person. Okay, but would it have been better performed by a fat person in that general geographic area that saw the casting, like, audition advertisement and went? Like, there's layers to this. General studios can't, like, scan every fat actor in the country to fill the role. It's kind of based on geographical location and who sees it and who auditions for it, and then whether that person has the skills necessary for the role. So I think saying that once those parameters are applied, I think saying that no matter what, it would have been better acted by a fat person is just, I just have a problem with absolute language, I guess. This has never happened. This is, like, you didn't see the casting auditions. You didn't see any of that. So I just tend to think, I'm not saying that there wouldn't be some prejudice against the actor simply because they're fat. I'm sure that plays a role, but I don't know if in every circumstance you can say that this would 100% be the thing. I guess I just have a problem with absolute language. It's just a sticking point for me. And I feel like this sort of absolutist take inhibits the actual discussion. Now, this person was a little bit more flippant than, it's the same person, I think, but they became more flippant in this comment than they were in the last one. But I still don't think that they were rude. And this is just, I'm just kind of extending that conversation of, at what point should you just scroll on and not engage in the conversation? And I don't know. But on this particular point for this particular TikTok, I disagree. I don't think that no matter what, a fat person playing a fat person is always 100% better given the parameters of geographic location and opportunity. So I don't know.
I've only seen the first season of BoJack Horseman, so I can't speak about...
So the comment he's replying to is, I thought Diane's fatness in the later seasons of BoJack Horseman was good rep, but curious to hear your thoughts if you've watched the show.
This specific instance of fat rep in animation, but in general, my feelings about fat rep in animation is a little split. Because on the one hand, it can give us some fantastic fat representation. I honestly think that Kung Fu Panda, at least in my opinion, is one of the best examples of positive fat representation in film. And part of that is due to the fact that the character Po is voiced by a fat actor, Jack Black. But a lot of it is just how the fat character is shown in the movie. On the other hand, we have a movie like Into the Spider-Verse, which is damn near a perfect film, but is marred by a couple of unnecessary and unfunny fat jokes. So animation is just as susceptible to fat phobia as live action is. And then sometimes it just feels like they're using fat suits, which they kind of are in animation. It's Hollywood once again saying that we'll give you the occasional fat character just as long as we don't actually have to hire any fat people.
So when it comes to like the actual topic that the comment referenced, as Diane for BoJack Horseman, I'm actually a big fan of BoJack Horseman as a series. I think that it did a pretty good exploration of some very flawed characters. And it's unfortunate that they had to rush season 6 because if it felt like if it had been given a chance to breathe for maybe another season, it would have been a truly spectacular wrap-up. Not that it wasn't. The View from Halfway Down was easily one of the most impactful episodes of any series I have ever experienced. It was amazing. But back to Diane specifically. So Diane starts out the series as a thin woman that has a lot of repressed trauma and mental health issues and broken relationships and dysfunctional relationships. And we kind of watch her go through all of that. And taking the antidepressants, which impacted her weight gain, was a point that wasn't ignored in the series. It was just highlighted subtly in a very non-judgmental way. And I think it was focusing on she's taking steps to better herself. And while that might... It kind of framed it as, you know, the weight gain is no big deal. She's mentally better now, so that's what matters. And to a certain extent, I agree, especially when we saw how fragile Diane was at her lowest mental health point. So I like to view it more as she had to fix her mental health first, and then she can get into maybe healthier habits that will help maintain a healthier weight for herself, but that wasn't the focus. At that moment, she needed to fix herself mentally first. There were, I think overall, it would have been if he had seen it, he would have been in favor of it because it was handled very tastefully for both sides, actually. I think even anti-FAs that saw it wouldn't necessarily have an issue with how Diane was handled, because I think she was handled very well, since it was a focus on her repairing herself and finding a happier place in her life. For fat representation in animation, I think I'm glad that he can acknowledge that Into the Spider-Verse was a fantastic movie. I've actually never seen it, but he can at least acknowledge that it was a good movie, even if he didn't like some of the jokes in it. I don't really like the idea of fat characters being essentially fat suits for thin actors. I don't know why, that just bugs me. And when it comes to Diane specifically, and I know he hasn't seen those episodes, because I believe we don't see Diane like that until season 6, until the final season. Diane's case was actually very much in favor of a lot of fat acceptance talking points in a lot of ways, but it was done in such a way that I think that the majority of people could acknowledge that it was best for Diane where she was at the time. And while we, like, I don't know. I feel like I'm going to go off on an aimless tangent if I continue, so I'm going to leave it there. But I'm curious about what your guys' opinion is of fat characters in animation. Is it really fat suits? If you've seen BoJack Horseman and you've seen all 6 seasons, what did you think of Diane and her transformation and how she was handled? I'm very curious about all of that.
Pushing fat phobia aside, which we shouldn't do, but I'm going to for the sake of this comment, pushing fat phobia aside, if you honestly think...
So before we hear his opinion, I just want to give you guys the full context of the comment. They obviously cast the best actor. If they had fat actors apply, they obviously weren't as good, or they would have been cast.
That all Hollywood ever does is just cast the best actor for a specific role. We don't even exist in the same reality. Budget, nepotism, and completely random superficial factors, of which fat phobia is one, are far more important to the casting of Hollywood movies, at least as it is today. I would love if that changed. And that's also ignoring that best actor is subjective. Pushing fat...
Best actor is definitely subjective, but it's also based on the impression that they leave on the committee. And I'm not going to say that weight doesn't play a role, because I'm sure it does, especially in the very image-conscious industry that is, you know, film and TV and that sort of thing. So I'm not going to say that, you know, weight doesn't play a role at all, but I would say that budget and nepotism are probably far more influential than the image. Like that comes in lower than, especially nepotism. I think nepotism plays a huge role. But I don't know. I still think that it's based a little bit on geography, and it's based on how many fat people actually applied. If only one fat person applied for that role, and you had 50 thinner actors, the chances are greater that one of the thinner actors was better for the role and had more acting skill than that one fat person, just in terms of statistics, just in terms of probability. But I don't know. I think we're getting into an argument of what ifs, in that ProfBrainFever is putting forth that no matter what, the fat actor would have been better, and I just don't agree with that. I think it's a matter of multiple factors, and I'm not convinced that every fat actor is going to be the best person to play a fat character, even if that seems a little counterintuitive, because you do have to take into account what kind of air, what kind of personality they present in their audition. What kind of skills do they present? That sort of thing, you know?
Is there a fat version of the Bechdel test? The Bechdel test, if you didn't know, is a test to determine the bare bones of a woman's representation in film. To pass the Bechdel test, a film has to have two women characters that are named that talk to each other about something other than a man or men in general. Again, passing this test is the bare bones, bare minimum of women's representation in film. Passing the test doesn't mean that the film is good. Failing the test doesn't mean that the film is bad. It's merely there to show how bad representation actually is. I just wonder, is there a version of this test we could create for fat people? Maybe to pass, a film has to have one named non-thin character whose weight is not commented on at all. What do you think? Is there a...
I'm going to pass this off to you guys. What do you think of the fat Bechdel test? ProfBrainFever's proposition of the fat Bechdel test. I don't really know how I feel about it. I guess I just kind of feel neutral about it. I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other. So I'm curious about what your opinions of the fat Bechdel test are.
You're absolutely right. If there was ever a test that would be called the Brain Fever test, it would be this, and it would be such a low bar. And it's very simply, a named character appears that is explicitly a fat character that is played by a fat actor or actress, not a thin actor or actress in a fat suit. That's it. That's all you got to do to pass that test. Doesn't mean the film's good. Doesn't mean the film's bad. Just means it's not total garbage.
I think that that's a bit of a leap to say that a film would be total garbage if it didn't feature that. Even films that don't necessarily pass the Bechdel test can still be very good and not complete garbage. It's just not a good representation of women. You know, there are issues with representation, there are issues with ways that women are presented in media, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the media itself was terrible. I mean, when it comes to use books as an example, Stranger in a Strange Land is a horrible, horrible representation of women at all. Like, they're all... granted, it was many years ago that I read it, but my memory of it was that all the women were basically treated as objects and not really given any autonomy in their own lives, really. But the story itself was still very interesting, and I think it was pretty good. Like, it was an interesting perspective on humanity and what it means to be human, and the whole Jesus ending was kind of interesting. But I don't know, I don't think that you can call any media garbage because it doesn't adhere to certain ideals of representation. As a woman, I've seen plenty of media that does not represent women well, but that doesn't mean that the media was garbage. You know, it doesn't mean that it was bad. As even Bechdel said, and even in his previous TikTok said, it wasn't, doesn't mean that it's bad. Do I still prefer stories like The Stepford Wives and The Handmaid's Tale to Stranger in a Strange Land? Yes, but that doesn't mean that Stranger in a Strange Land was garbage.
This is a teachable moment. Being fat yourself, being any level of overweight or fat, does not make you immune from being fatphobic. I still have internalized and external fatphobic thoughts from time to time about myself and sometimes about other people. Society, culture, media has programmed us to have this reaction to fat people. It's hard to fight against. And the other thing media and culture does is it tells us that we're not being fatphobic. We're just caring about people's health. Again, that comes up. You claim to not be fatphobic, but the comment that you originally placed was, we should not cast fat people because that just encourages an unhealthy lifestyle. My friend, you are dripping in fatphobia, and it's not pretty.
So the current comment that he is responding to, though, does say, I only include that because you accused me of fatphobia. I can assure you that I am not self-fatphobic. I don't know, that kind of got away from me. So I surprisingly enough, agree with ProfBrainFever in that I don't think that fat actors should be barred from roles that they are suited for, that they are skilled enough for, and that the casting committee would otherwise choose. I don't think that they should be excluded simply because they're fat. I do agree with that. I don't think that's necessarily a promotion of healthy lifestyle. I think that comes with the narrative of the story, if that's what's going to be promoted, not just a fat actor being cast as a fat character. I love Melissa McCarthy. I loved her as Suki in the Gilmore Girls. I loved her in Bridesmaids. I like her. I think she's funny. And I don't think that her simply being cast in a movie or anything would be a promotion of obesity or promotion of unhealthy lifestyles. So, I don't know. I don't, and then we get into the, is that fat phobic? And unfortunately, I do have, because so many things have been called fat phobic, I have a difficulty with the word as a whole. I have a difficulty with the concept as a whole because so much has been attributed to fat phobia that stuff that I disagree with too, like before and after pictures, intentional weight loss, that whole thing, that's an individual choice. That this, where I could actually be like, no, I could see how that idea that fat actors should be barred from roles that they are experienced enough for, that they are suited for, that the committee would otherwise choose them for, should only be barred simply because they're fat, and that would promote an unhealthy lifestyle. I disagree with that, and I would be willing to call that fat phobic, but I have an issue with the word fat phobia, you know? So anyway, let's move on.
What's something I'm sick of having to explain? That explicitly fat roles in media should go to fat actors. I don't know how to explain that more succinctly and get people to actually understand it instead of coming into my comments and saying, well, the best actor. I'm sorry. If the role is specifically for a fat person and you're a thin person wearing a fat suit, you're not the best actor. You're not, because you are being hindered by a giant prosthesis that makes your performance not as good as if you would have if you were a fat person doing the role. Word salad there, but I'm sick of having to explain that. What's something I'm sick?
So I actually understand his point a little bit in that if you have to wear a prosthesis that inhibits your movement, that your ability to convey, especially non-verbally, will be hindered and your performance may not be as good as a fat actor who always carries around that weight and has more natural movements. That being said, I don't think that's the case 100% of the time. I just don't. Like, I think, like I said before, it depends geographically, it depends on how many people answered the audition. Sometimes you don't get a talented fat actor, and the next best option would be to take a talented thin actor and put them in a prosthesis. Like, and I'm not saying that personal prejudices don't play a role in there. I'm sure it does. But I just have a problem with, again, the absolutism 100% of the time. It's better for fat actors to play fat characters. I think it depends on the pool that the casting committee has to choose from. And while there's definitely probably some personal prejudices that play a role there, that's not always the case, you know?
You know what? I'm actually going to agree with you. When it comes to my rule that an explicitly fat character should be played by a fat actor, movies like Shallow Hal and The Nutty Professor are exceptions, but maybe not for the reason you think. They're exceptions because they're bad, unfunny, and hateful towards fat people, and they're movies that probably shouldn't have been made in the first place. Yes, art is subjective, but that's a hill I'm willing to die on. You know what?
I never saw The Nutty Professor, but I've seen like 3/4 of Shallow Hal. I actually don't mind the movie Shallow Hal. Granted, I tend to like anything with Jack Black in it, but even if we put that aside, I don't know. I don't know Nutty Professor, but I didn't think that Shallow Hal was 100% negative towards fat people. Then again, it's been like 10 years since I've seen the movie, so perhaps I'm not remembering like key points in it. I don't know. I I guess I just get tired of the demonization of movies that don't fit current societal standards. You know, there's movies that have issues, especially based on current societal views, but I think they can still be good movies. You know, kind of like what I said with good books. Like Stranger in a Strange Land is still a good book, even with its sexist issues that are, like, fundamental in the story.
So there's this video going around, this sort of round table of thin people, and they basically say that if you're a fat woman, specifically in their example, you don't deserve a non-fat man who makes six figures. Which, first of all, if you're putting it in those terms, you are incredibly shallow and gross. But on top of that, I just have one question. How terrified are you of ever becoming fat? Like, day in, day out, are you absolutely frightened out of your mind that you might gain 1 extra pound? That is a sad, sad way to live.
So I'm pretty sure the one that what he's referring to, wasn't that the clip with Just Pearly Things? Who was, as you guys have basically told me, is generally a pick-me. And I think that whole conversation was made to be inflammatory, so you're kind of playing into it. I don't know, the more I've looked into that situation, the more I've decided to not cover Just Pearly Things, just because she's a lot. And it's a bit more, I mean, she's a serious pick-me, so it's a little outside my wheelhouse. I'm not saying I'll never cover her, but I feel like I need to build up to Just Pearly Things. I don't think that that's a good representation of how thin people view fat people. Because I think that that whole conversation was meant to be inflammatory. I think that whole conversation was meant to stir up some drama. And you guys played right into it, you know? But if you use it as an example to validate your sense of oppression, anyone that knows the situation and stuff is going to know what you're doing. And those that don't will eventually see that you guys tend to create oppression for yourselves at every turn, rather than accepting even a modicum of responsibility for your situation. I'm not saying that losing weight is easy. I'm not saying that it doesn't take people a concerted effort. But I don't know. I've seen too much of the fat acceptance movement to take anything like this at face value.
Do you want to see a bait and switch?
Losing weight for your health is not fatphobic, and if you think otherwise, you are fucking delusional.
Okay, so that's the establishing comment, and I don't necessarily agree with it. I've never heard anyone say that people losing weight specifically for their health was fatphobic, but if they did, I could understand disagreeing with that stance. But let's see how she goes on.
The fact that there's a large group of people that actually think in their brains that losing weight intentionally is fatphobic.
It changed. Did you hear it?
Losing weight for your health, losing weight intentionally.
Now, I'm not going to make the claim that this was an intentional bait and switch, but it was obviously a bait and switch. She went from people losing weight for their health to people losing weight intentionally. And these are not the same thing.
No, but there's an overlap. Let's not pretend that they're mutually exclusive. I want to throw that out there. Because a lot of people that lose weight intentionally also lose weight for their health. There's an overlap there. It is a Venn diagram. It's not a circle. There is an overlap. It's not a circle, but it's not mutually exclusive either. But there is an overlap, I should say.
Unless you think that weight correlates perfectly with health. And it does.
No. That's a bullshit statement. Unless you think weight correlates perfectly with health. No one's saying that. No one who's even losing weight for health or intentionally losing weight thinks that. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have to correlate perfectly. Because correlation perfectly implies causation, and everyone knows that correlation doesn't equal causation, but because there is a level of correlation with weight and health, it is not unreasonable for some people to lose weight intentionally, either for health or sometimes people just want to do it for aesthetic reasons. And I don't really think that what someone else does with their body is any of your goddamn business. You guys want to be left alone. I understand that. And that's fine, but then don't go and attack people who want to lose weight for their own fucking reasons.
Doesn't. Claiming that you are losing weight for your health when the evidence doesn't back it up, that is fatphobic, whether you intend it or not.
What do you mean when the evidence doesn't back it up? There's plenty of evidence to back up that lower weights lead to better health outcomes to a certain point. It's the healthy weight category that we are looking at. And let's say that you're not even aiming for the healthy weight category. You're just looking to lose weight to alleviate joint pain or certain menstrual disorders, or I've heard losing weight can help with fibromyalgia symptoms, or any of that. And again, I just have to say, this is no one's fucking business but their own. Like, it's not your business if someone chooses to lose weight for health reasons, and whether you agree with it or disagree with it, it's not your fucking business. It's one of those things where it's like, if a fat person were just existing on the internet, not putting out shit like this, and it was just existing on the internet, if ProfBrainFever was just posting about social nerd culture shit, and people were in his comments talking about his weight, then no, that's not nice, that's not good. Leave him the fuck alone, he's living his life. But then he puts out shit like this, and the absolute statements around fat actors that we've seen. And I can't help but be like, you are opening yourself up for opposing opinions. If you were just talking about what your experience is as a fat actor, then that people should leave you alone. If you were, oh God, I hate this.
I want to thank you, anonymous random commenter, because...
So the comment reads, fat phobia is not a thing. Why do you think doctors say you need to lose weight for your health? Stop being delusional.
It's without commenters like you, I wouldn't have any content. And because there's so many different ways I could respond to this comment. First of all, doctors are people, and people are just as susceptible to having fat phobia, regardless of their profession. And here's an interesting thing. We don't know how to lose weight. Not for most people effectively long-term without gaining it back. We don't. And that's unfortunately a fact.
Yes, we do. It's small steps, lifestyle changes. The issue is, and the reason, like, I really want them to cite that study with the 98% of people will gain the weight back in XYZ. I want to know what diets they were on, because if they were on fad diets, Atkins diet, and I know I'm going to list a couple on here that people do sustainably do. That's great for you, but I'm talking about those in the obese category trying to be healthy. These are not sustainable for the average fat person because it's just too much of a leap. They might be able to get there eventually, but going straight from the way they're eating now to like keto or carnivore or paleo is often far too much of a jump for them, and they need more small steps in order to be successful. I just, like, where's, because I'm making some assumptions here. He may not be referring to that 98% study, but what are you referring to exactly when you say we don't know how to lose weight and keep it off for the majority of people? I'm not convinced that we don't. I mean, we know how to lose weight and keep it off. The issue is adherence. You know, it's not a matter of biological issues. It's a matter of behavioral issues and adherence issues, not weight loss itself, but the act of losing weight that's the issue, you know? And I don't know, there's just, that's a loaded statement right there.
So if your doctor ever tells you you need to lose weight, just ask them how, because that is the difficult thing. And my doctor, once they understood that I didn't want to lose weight for aesthetic reasons, they stopped telling me to do it because my health is not affected. I'm lucky.
No, they probably stopped telling you to do it because you were very resistant and it was affecting other conversations around your health. Like you said, doctors are people, and sometimes people get fed up of the obstinate.
In that regard, thanks. I want to thank you.
So, losing weight does play a role in your health, whether you want to admit that or not. And, God, I've responded to this sort of line of thought so many times. I feel like I am out of ways to communicate this. But weight does play a role in health. And I really need to learn to just have a tab open, already signed in, to look up research articles. Not that it makes a difference to the fat acceptance community. And we'll see that when we get to, I really want to say her name was Anti-Diet Pilot. And the correlation doesn't equal causation, or the suggestion versus confirmation, or any of that shit. But anyway, we're going to move on. I'm going to do one more for today, and then we'll end it. I honestly thought I would get through ProfBrainFever a lot faster, but we've only been through about a month's worth of TikToks. Because there's more fat acceptance rhetoric on his page than I was anticipating.
I feel like I keep saying this, but the phobia is...
So, the comment says, fat phobia definitely is not a thing, at least not in the context people seem to use it, who is pathologically scared of fat people.
It's about disgust of fat people, and it's about fear of becoming fat because of the disgust. Nobody uses it nobody uses the word fat phobia the way that you seem to think people are using it. I feel like
I'll admit I haven't seen the use of fat phobia in the terms of you're scared of fat people. It is like a disgust and you are becoming fat. Even so, I've also seen it used for a lot of things, like even just preference. Let's say I'm not scared of becoming fat, but I don't really want to become fat, and I would prefer to lose some weight, maybe for my own aesthetic reasons. Maybe I prefer the look of myself. It doesn't have to do with the fear of becoming fat or the disgust of fat people if you want to lose weight for yourself. And I think that's where my issue with fat phobia tends to come in, that the before and after pictures, just this general policing of what people choose to do with their own bodies is my issue with fat phobia. The term fat phobia and how it's used. Like, I think, I tend to think that the fat acceptance movement uses it in a way that I find is very anti-body autonomy, and I have issues with that. So, that's my issue with fat phobia. But I don't really think it's worth communicating with the fat acceptance community on this sticking point, because I think that the fat acceptance community will use any level of rationalization to promote the assertion of their oppression. And if you have a differing opinion, no matter how much you try to temper that with understanding and temper that with the promotion of discussion, it's always going to be swept under the rug as, oh, you're just fat phobic, oh, you're just choosing to misunderstand, you're just choosing to be ignorant, you're just choosing, maybe you should just believe you oppress people. It always comes like back around to that, rather than acknowledging that maybe there's an issue with the way that those that use the word fat phobic are using it. Maybe you guys are taking too much of an extreme stance on this, because there was even something earlier where it's like, okay, I can see how that would be fat phobic, but I have such an issue with the word fat phobia because of how people have used it in the past. So it's unfortunate, because I was really hoping to like ProfBrainFever a little bit more. I like nerd culture. I like the discussion of comics and anime and all of that stuff. But he's such a hard line on fat phobia and what that means and fat representation and that sort of thing that I unfortunately find myself getting frustrated with him. And it's unfortunate because I really wanted to like him. But, I mean, we are where we are. We are barely over a month into his TikToks. I have no idea how long this is going to take, because I think it's going to take longer than the 2 to 3 parts that I originally thought it was, simply because he has so many TikToks on fat acceptance. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on this guy. Let me know in the comments. I'm recording this way earlier than I normally record my videos, so this might be up early in the coming week than is normal. But we'll see. So thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.